Now, over time, the Israelites once again did things that made God angry. Step one, he allowed the Midianites to overpower Israel and rule them in a cruel way for 40 years. Step two, the Midianites would routinely raid the farms of the Israelites, taking all their crops and livestock so they had no food. The Israelites cried out to God for help. Step three, they repented. God heard their cries. You can read that in Judges chapter 6, verses 1 and 10. He rose up one of the most famous judges in the era of the judges, and his name was Gideon. Now, Gideon was from the weakest tribe in Israel, and he was the weakest one in his tribe. So God picked the weakest guy from the weakest tribe. A lot of times throughout the Bible, God will pick broken people, weak people, people nobody else will want. And one of the reasons why that's so is so when God does something miraculous through them, the person themselves and other people won't think, oh, well, that guy did it on his own because he's just spectacular. He's smart and he's strong and he's good looking. And no, that when a person that had no qualities or good qualities wouldn't do something spectacular, both that person and the people who saw it go, yeah, that guy couldn't do it. God had to do that. That was God. There's no way he could do that. So he picked the weakest guy in the weakest tribe to save Israel from their oppressors. So God appeared to Gideon. Again, at this point, God's still talking to people face to face at times. That stops after Moses. And God told him that God was with him and that Gideon would be a mighty man of valor. And God was sending Gideon to defeat their Midianite oppressors. And Gideon said to God, me? God said, yes, Gideon, you're going to be a great warrior. You're going to free the Israelites. Me? Yes, Gideon, you. Gideon found this hard to believe because he was very shy and weak. God instructed Gideon to tear down an altar made to Baal and the Ashtaroth and replace it with an altar of God. And Gideon did this as God instructed him to. Now, the townspeople wanted Gideon put to death for tearing down the altar to Baal and the Ashtaroth, but Gideon's father stepped in and defended Gideon. And he said to the people of Israel, will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. And Gideon's father said that in Judges chapter 6, verse 32. Well, the breaking down of the altar to Baal and the Ashtaroth caused Gideon now to get respect from his people. Gideon was now filled with the Spirit of God. Now again, whenever you hear that, God's going to do something big with somebody when the Spirit of God falls on him. The people of many tribes of Israel came out and they followed Gideon. You can read that in Judges chapter 6, verses 33 to 35. Gideon asked God if he could put God to two tests to make sure it was actually God that was appearing to him and telling him to save Israel. So God, if this is you, I want to put you to two tests. And if you pass the test, I'll know it's you. And God said, okay, go ahead. So Gideon created these two tests that he wanted God to do, and God passed them. Of course, he's God, all right? And once Gideon was convinced that it was God, actually, that was telling him to defeat the Midianites, he agreed to do whatever God told him to do. Again, important to know. If God speaks to you and you know it's God and he's telling you to do something, do it if you know it's God, okay? Do it. Gideon gathered 32,000 men of Israel to fight the Midianites, who had a much larger force of soldiers. Now, I don't know the exact number, but I believe I remember reading at some point that the Midianite oppressors that took over Israel had 135,000 soldiers. So it's 135,000 soldiers of the Midianites versus the 32,000 that Gideon gathered. So the Israelites under Gideon are outnumbered 4-1. God told Gideon that Israel had too many soldiers for the battle. He said if they beat the Midianites outnumbered 4-1, they would think they did it because they were great soldiers and had, enough numbers to beat them, but not because it was God that actually won the battle for them. So God said, say this to the soldiers, and Gideon did. He said, okay, listen up, guys. God told me to tell you this. There's 32,000 of us, and there's 135,000 of them. So God said, if any of you don't really want to fight and want to leave and go home, he said it's okay to do that. Well, 22 out of 32,000 said, really? Gideon said, yeah. See ya. And they left. So 22,000 soldiers left. So now it was 10,000 Israelites versus 135,000 Midianites. So now they're outnumbered 13.5-1. God told Midian he still had too many soldiers. Gideon's probably like, oh my goodness. So God said, okay, this is what I want you to do, Gideon. send the soldiers to the river to drink and watch how they drink. So now there's only 10,000. And when they went to the river to drink, 9,700 of the soldiers bent down and they scooped water up in their hands to drink, like this. 300 put their face in the water and licked up with their tongue like a dog drinks water out of a bowl. God said to Gideon, okay, those 9,700 that scooped up water in their hands, send them home. We don't need them. You're going to fight the Midianites with 300 guys that drank water like a dog. So Gideon listened, and he sent the 9,700 home. So now it's 135,000 versus 300. Now there would be no way that the Israelites would believe that they could defeat the Midianites just because they were such great soldiers. To defeat the Midianites, these 300 Israelites needed a miracle from God, and God was about to give them one. You read that in Judges chapter 7, verse 1 to 8. So God told Gideon to give each of his soldiers a horn and divide them into 3 companies of 100 soldiers each. When Gideon gave the signal, the 300 soldiers blew their horn and yelled, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" As soon as they yelled this, God caused confusion among all the Midianite troops, and they began to attack each other. The entire Midianite army wiped themselves out. Gideon's army of 300 men did not even have to fight. God did all the fighting for them. Once again, the Israelites are finally free from their oppressors. You read that in Judges chapter 7 and chapter 8. Now,